When the tomb of King Tutankhamun, was discovered nearly 100 years ago, it revolutionized our understanding of ancient Egypt. However, as Egyptologists started taking a second sober look at his tomb, they began to realize it was weird. And that is what we're going to touch upon today in this episode of Ancient Egypt and the Bible. When the tomb of King Tut was first discovered in 1922, it was the first intact tomb of an Egyptian king that was discovered. It was so full of artifacts that even today, not all of them have been fully published. 100 years after its discovery, Egyptologists are starting to appreciate how unique Tut's tomb was. When it was discovered, it was thought that King Tut was just a minor king, so this was supposedly an impoverished burial for the great kings of the Egyptian 18th and 19th dynasties. However, when we started looking at the artifacts found in King Tut's tomb and compared them with what remained from other great kings of dynasties 18 and 19, we started to discover that King Tut's burial was truly unique. From the excavation done by Howard Carter, he found that Tut was buried in a stone sarcophagus with 3 concentric coffins. The outer 2 were basically made of wood, covered in metal foil, and decorated with stones. But the inner coffin was very unusual. It was completely made out of gold. Now, what makes this so unusual is when we look at, say, the coffins of other kings and queens of the New Kingdom, those coffins, we have the inner coffin, but it wasn't gold. It was wood covered in seemingly gold foil and decorated with precious stones. So very, very similar to King Tut's outer 2 coffins. So Egyptologists have started to ask, how is it that King Tut, a relatively minor king from Dynasty 18, why does he have such a much more opulent burial than, say, the other great kings of the time? Well, to explain this, we need to go into the history of the Amarna period. Now, the Amarna period actually begins with King Akhenaten, who made a form of monolatrous pantheism called Atonism, the royal cult for all of Egypt. And in this cult, King Akhenaten said that there is only one deity, the Aten, which was a sun god, the sun disk. And all other gods were manifestations of the Aten. And in the 6th year of his reign, King Akhenaten relocated the capital of Egypt from Thebes to a virgin site which he called Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten, which is very, very near modern Amarna. There he ruled for 11 years with his great queen Nefertiti. While at Akhetaten, King Akhenaten planned for himself a burial that would rival the gods. And his great queen, Nefertiti, also planned a lavish burial that would rival that of a king. However, the planning of these 2 funerals was overambitious. Put it in context, the plan that Akhenaten made for himself to create this lavish burial was on the scale of building a pyramid. but for a rock-cut tomb. When Akhenaten died prematurely in his early 50s, the preparations for his burial weren't complete. He had bitten off more than he could chew here. But Nefertiti's burial preparations were ready, and it appears that Akhenaten was buried in Nefertiti's coffin. Now, we believe that Akhenaten's coffin was the one that was located in Theban tomb KV55. And we can see from this picture that his coffin had a female wig. And it fits very well with the artistic representations that we have of Queen Nefertiti that we find in her official sculptures. And you can see here that when her bust is superimposed over the coffin, it fits perfectly with the defaced portion that was torn away from the coffin. Now, Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves had suggested that Tut was buried in Nefertiti's coffin based upon the effeminate features found on one of the coffins in combination with some of the clearly female statuary that is found in his tomb. However, Tut's coffins don't show signs of being converted from a female style to a male style coffin. His coffins seem to indicate that they were originally designed for a male king, since they do not have the features that we would find on a female coffin, such as placement of the hands, a raised area for the breasts, a wig, etc. But at the same time, the faces of the coffins do seem to indicate that they don't all come from the same funerary assemblage. And an assemblage is just a collection of funerary goods. So these coffins do seem to indicate that they are from different burials. So how do we account for this? Well, for a 2-year period after the end of Akhenaten's reign, there seems to be some doubt over who was in control. Semenkhare, a king that followed King Akhenaten, reigned for only about a year, maybe 2 years. And then after that, King Tut came to the throne. And Tut reigned at Amarna for 3 years. And then he relocated his capital back to Thebes, where he reinstituted polytheistic system back into Egypt. And 7 years later, Tut then also died. So what appears to have happened is that during the reign of King Tut, the funerary assemblage that was originally begun for Akhenaten, which was overly ambitious to begin with, was continued by his successors and came to fruition during the reign of King Tut. And by a stroke of incredible luck and fortunate placement of his tomb, his funerary assemblage survived the looting until the present. In Tut's tomb, we find a vast array of objects that aren't contemporary with Tut himself. There are objects that belong to his immediate predecessors, King Akhenaten, Semenkhare, and Nefertiti, but also objects that dated to the reign of Amenhotep III and even Tutmosis III. Some Egyptologists have postulated that this was the result of Tut's successor, King I, cleaning house, essentially ridding the royal palace of these Dynasty 18 objects to make the way clear for the new dynasty that he was starting. So there is that idea that Tut's tomb became more or less a dumping ground for the past. Let's bury the past so we can just forget about it and move on. Whatever the reason, we have come to appreciate how unique Tut's burial was, even for a king of Egypt. It was sumptuous beyond the young king's years and achievements, and it was the inheritance he received from the kings of the past. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.